Hey everyone, my name is John Dominguez. I'm a clinical psychologist from Meridian Psychiatric Partners. Thanks for joining. Today I'll be presenting the first video in a series of 6 on general psychological wellness. Today's first installment is on preventative mental health. So I'll be presenting a model to get us to think about preventative mental health care. We think about medical preventive health care a lot, and I think it is wise to do the same with our mental health. So, and you'll also find that there's a lot of overlap with the things that we do for good preventative physical health care and mental health care. That's not an accident. So when we jump in, you'll see exactly what I mean. So let's do that. Let's jump in. So I mentioned this is the first of 6 videos in a psychological wellness series. Very quickly, if you're interested and you want to pursue these on this platform, the second video is on personal growth, the third on social problem solving, fourth on interpersonal conflict resolution. So 3 and 4 are really about interpersonal effectiveness, and 5 and 6 are really about how we manage and express our emotions and cope with them in a healthy way. So hopefully you'll find today's video somewhat useful and be interested in following up with these 5. But let's jump into what we're talking about today. And what I want to present in terms of preventive mental health care is a model which I call SENSE, S-E-N-S-E. I'm going to throw a lot of acronyms at you guys if you hang in with this series. And again, I hate to be that didactic, but I do want these things to be somewhat memorable and user friendly. So I'm going to go into each of these 5 components in some detail over the course of this video, but just to give you the heads up and save you the suspense, the S-E-N, S and E that I'm talking about are sleep, exercise, nutrition, self-care, and engagement. And like I mentioned in the prologue, look at the top 3 with sleep, exercise, and nutrition. These are our top 3 preventative physical health care things to do as well. And again, that's not an accident. Our physical and mental health are inexorably linked. And then the final 2 are a little more psychological in nature, so I have a lot more to say about those, and those are self-care and engagement. So just a little preview, but let's unpack these if you guys don't mind. So the first is sleep. We all know what sleep is. We've all heard a million times how important it is. And I am not a sleep expert or sleep hygienist, but I do want to say some things about that. And I do have some professional experiences with helping people manage anxiety and other negative feelings around bedtime. Bedtime is a time where most people are kind of vulnerable. Sometimes when it's dark and it's quiet, that's when we can have a lot of thoughts populate our head that aren't always pleasant. Again, that's when we're most vulnerable to such things. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but some basic things about sleep hygiene that most of you have heard about. So I'll speed through this stuff. It's very hard for anybody to go to sleep when they're dysregulated. So most people need some time to decompress before they can, find some restfulness and sleep, at the end of a day. So good sleep hygiene, would involve some form of decompression where you're toning down your body, you're doing things that aren't 100% stimulating to your body and your brain. You're just trying to get it prepared for rest. Some people read, some people listen to soft music, some people watch brainless shows or videos. These are all common ways where people can kind of decompress from what could have been a very stressful day in order to invite sleep the best way that they can. So that's something to think about. Another thing that you'll hear about with sleep is your body is most responsive to having a predictable time to sleep every night. I don't think it's 100% realistic to think that everybody should go to sleep at the exact same time every night. I think everybody on vacation and on weekends tends to push their bedtime back, and that's not criminal behavior or unsafe or really unhealthy behaviors, but it is worth saying that the more consistent you are with the amount of sleep that you give yourself, in addition to what time you go to sleep, that's worth noting here. So, and I don't have to tell you, a sufficient amount of sleep, you know, for for kids and teenagers is probably 8 to 10 hours. For adults, it's around 8, give or take. And so, our choice to have around a predictable, consistent sleep time every night and to allow for that much sleep is, a couple things that we can do to improve our sleep hygiene, and as I said, welcome the sleep that we want to have. So when we do commit that time to sleep, it's important that you're resting your eyes and you're resting your body. This isn't the time to um, turn on screens or play video games or listen to music for the purposes of like rocking out and dancing. If you want to listen to music, it should be calming um, and relatively quiet. There are a ton of apps that people can put on their phones that can be in sort of in the background as of your sleep time, as either noise canceling or like waves and rain and all these things that some people find calming. So I don't have to plug those. You can Google those and search those, and you'll find dozens. So, but just a couple, things to think about. This is not the time we devote to sleep. This isn't the time to get up and run around and do all this other stuff. It's really devoting that much time to sleep. And this is where I disagree with some sleep hygienists, because some sleep hygienists will say, if you're in your bed and you're trying to go to sleep and it's been about 20 or 30 minutes and you haven't been able to fall asleep, might be a good idea to sort of get up and walk around, maybe have a cup of tea or glass of water. Don't do anything too overstimulating, but might be okay to just kind of walk around and then return to bed in a few minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. The reason for that, which I completely honor and agree with and can acknowledge, is you don't want your bed to be associated with anything other than sleep. So if you're struggling in your bed to find sleep, it could be a good idea to step out of bed, go sit on the couch for a bit, and then come back. You don't want to associate your bed with a place that's not restful and not sleepy. The reason why I look at that a little bit differently, even though I can appreciate the sleep hygiene part of that and the association part of that, is I'm concerned with anxiety management in that quiet dark when we're trying to devote ourselves to sleep. So um, instead of, trying to avoid associating non-sleep with the bed, I want to sort of reframe that experience. So in my professional as well as my personal life, when I would have trouble sleeping, perhaps because I was anxious, I would then start to become more anxious about not being able to sleep. So I'm having anxiety about my daily stressors, but now I'm compounding that with anxiety about not being able to fall asleep. And obviously that can snowball very, very quickly. So I wanted to flip the script on that, and I learned how to do that. And that was really to kind of talk myself through this idea that if I devote enough time to sleep and I'm resting my eyes and I'm resting my body and I'm in a dark, quiet room and I'm inviting sleep and preparing myself to sleep, even in the extremely unlikely case that I don't fall asleep at all that night, I'm still going to be, and I can't stress how unlikely that would be. But even if that were the case, I would still be able to function the next day. My body's rested, my eyes are rested. I'll be able to get through the next day. I have had people tell me, I don't know if they're being completely honest. I have had people tell me that, oh, they didn't sleep one wink, not one wink. They tried all night to go to sleep. They didn't go to sleep. Again, I have questions about the accuracy and reporting, as I probe further, but even in that improbable case, control what you can control. Rest your eyes, rest your body, and think happy thoughts. Thinking happy thoughts is easier said than done, but I'm going to talk about a couple things here. And what you want to do if you're in bed and you're having trouble falling asleep, especially if your head is spinning with intrusive thoughts that are increasing your emotional arousal, making you more scared or depressed or mad or whatever, try to control that thinking with, populating your head with more benign, positively, more positive related thoughts. With For me, that might be planning the next new meal I want to learn how to make, or planning my next vacation for my family, or planning the next chapter in a book I'm writing, like things that can occupy my headspace but are benign from an emotional activation standpoint and are kind of pleasant, or potentially pleasant. Um, the counting sheep, that's where the counting sheep comes in. You just want to occupy your headspace with something that's completely benign. I'm not a sheep counter. I've never had to be, so I don't know if that works, but I hear it does work for people, but it's the same idea behind that. So that's that piece of it. The other piece about the anxiety management during sleep is, I mentioned a few minutes ago that we are most vulnerable to intrusive negative thinking at bedtime because it is dark and it is quiet, and we have the sense of being alone and being the only, even if you're sharing a bed with someone, if they're sleeping soundly, um, you can still feel like, you're the only person on the planet who isn't sleeping and can't seem to, get rest. So what a lot of people do, like, these are what I call the angels of the silences. Okay, and that term I stole from a band called Counting Crows, who wrote a song about what I am certain is about exactly what I'm talking about. These are the thoughts that intrude our headspace when we're trying to go to sleep at night, and they're usually pretty cruel, or at least, you know at least they're irritating, because they might be thoughts that are congruent with depression or anxiety. This is when we're most vulnerable to, worrying about tomorrow, being sad about earlier in the day. And these thoughts can be pretty powerful, and pretty stressful at this time of the day. So, like, um, helping to address the angels of the silences in a way that's healthy is another piece of good sleep hygiene. And some talking points on that is just to understand that, when you are emotionally activated, during at any time, but certainly during sleep, because you have some depression related or anxious related kind of thinking as you're trying to go to sleep, just understanding that those thoughts, because they're coming from such an emotional place, they might not be rational, and that they might not have, a lot of evidence to back them up. So being able to identify those thoughts for what they are, and being able to look for some disconfirming and counter evidence, just so you can manage those thoughts, that could be helpful, and that could open the door to you being able to, um, um, insert some more positive thinking, into your head at night as you're trying to go to sleep. So staying regulated in that way. But we all know that we are most vulnerable to these angels of the silences, during sleep. So I probably said too much about that in terms of what you guys already know, but I apologize. But let's move on to the second component of that's the E, that's the exercise, the first E, I should say. And yeah, I'm not a physical therapist or a, fitness guru guy, and a lot of this, I'm sure, because it's very well researched and talked about. But there is certainly a positive correlation between our neurochemical balance and our emotional regulation and consistent physical activity or exercise. And, making sure it is consistent. You don't want to be just a weekend warrior who, is pretty sedentary throughout the week, but on Saturday or Sunday, you do one vigorous workout. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about consistent exercise, and that could create some other problems related to heart and other things as well, in muscles. So consistency is key. And the other thing that I like to talk about around here is there's so many different types of workouts. Like, I don't need to go into that here, but just finding fun and meaningful, but also really creative workouts that you can do. Um, and perhaps combining them with social connection. You'll see as we go into this video further, we're talking about some social connection. This could be sort of like a two birds with one stone kind of thing. A lot of exercising that we can do can be social. Playing tennis with someone, playing intramural volleyball, joining a bowling league, whatever you want to do. There's so many exercise opportunities that's combined with social connectedness, and that could, like I said, a double whammy that could help you out in two ways. Um, and there's a lot, to be said about exercise and overall wellness. This is like self-esteem. This is just feeling healthier, maybe even feeling a little lighter on your feet. If you're getting consistent exercise, weight management isn't as big of an issue. That's one less thing to worry about and one more thing to feel good about. So, I can't say, you can't underscore enough, the relationship between exercise and good general health, including psychological wellness, which is what this series talks about. It's also a good neurochemically. It's a protective factor against the depression and anxiety and anger symptoms. So just a huge plug on exercise. But again, this is nothing new to you guys. And again, I'm not a fitness expert, but that's definitely an important component of preventative mental health is exercise. So moving into component number 3, nutrition. Again, I sound like a broken record. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a health nut when it comes to food intake. I can been known to cheat around this stuff. I like to eat what I like to eat, but if I'm doing that to an extent that is not healthy for my body, it does and it will impact my psychological wellness. And I think anyone who's experienced that knows what I'm talking about. And it certainly makes sense in theory. It makes sense if you've gone through it as well. So there's a lot of information again on nutrition and diet plans and things like that. So in the same way with exercise, I encourage you to do the research, explore, and find a good nutritional plan that works for your lifestyle, that's healthy, but it's also kind of creative, exciting. And maybe again, you could combine it with something social. You can join a cooking class that focuses on healthy recipes or whatever. I mean, there's a number of things to hopefully get excited about to increase your level of good nutrition in your life. So um, please explore that for yourself and be creative and find something that works for you. So sleep, exercise, and nutrition. Those are the first 3. The next 2 are more psychological in nature, as I mentioned. So I have a little bit more to say about that. But if you just look at the first 3, because a lot of my professional work has been with teenagers, adolescents. So when I preach good psychological wellness and preventative mental health care, I obviously open with sleep, exercise, and nutrition, and they look at me like I'm speaking another language, because who hasn't cheated those 3 areas of your health: sleep, exercise, and nutrition? We all have. And I'm not here to preach that you can never do that or that's so rat bad and so wrong. But I am saying that if we're more thoughtful and planful about getting good sleep, consistent exercise, and healthy nutrition, I guarantee you it will improve that sense of self, medical, psychological, and otherwise. Because I would have students who would show up to school in the morning. I, I worked at a therapeutic day school for several years. So this is like a typical day for me where students would come in and they'd be on 2 hours sleep. They had 2 Monster Energy drinks for breakfast, and nothing else. They haven't worked out in God knows how long. And by 9:30 in the morning, they're tired, they're restless, they're twitchy, their stomach hurts, they have a headache, they want to go home because they feel stressed and they can't concentrate on their work. And why do they need to stay at school? And I'm not suggesting that these students didn't have real stressors and real depressive symptoms, because they did. But these poor guys, they never even gave themselves a chance. They never even gave their body a chance to manage their daily stress. They came in on no sleep, energy drinks, having not exercised in God knows how long, and they just did not prepare their body and mind for success from a stress management perspective that day at all. Just never gave it a chance. So can't say enough about how having good sleep, exercise, and nutrition can boost your psychological immunity in very significant ways. I think you understand that point. I don't need to beat that dead horse anymore. So let's move into the fourth one, the second S, which is self-care. So there can be a lot of components to self-care. I'll talk about a handful of them, but the continuum of self-care, it can be as basic as med compliance and hygiene, and it can be as sophisticated as your existential, you know, health and self-care. So, and everything in between. So, yes, if you have prescribed medication, making sure you're complying with that on a consistent basis, making sure that you're prioritizing and making your year and however interval health appointments that you have. And hygiene. I mean, hygiene, again, a lot of the kids that I see or have seen, their hygiene was very closely linked to their overall sense of self. And that's not always the case. And good hygiene doesn't always promote good self esteem, but they are strongly correlated. And the students that I've worked with who were neglectful of their hygiene, it won't surprise you that these were also um, students who didn't give themselves a whole lot of self-respect in other areas as well. So this is a pretty important thing. And I've also worked with a lot of students who are on the autism spectrum, and they would have hygiene issues, not because it related to poor self-esteem and depression per se, but it was more of a sensory issue. They don't like feeling wet. They don't like the water on them. They might be less sensitive to their how they look and how they smell, and caring about that. So they're at risk for hygiene issues. But those students who were able to make and follow through on a better hygiene plan, you could see their self-esteem get boosted. And for a number of reasons, not the least of which is people were responding to them differently, like socially, like when your hygiene is in a good place versus not, people interact with you in a different way. And I don't mean, as extreme as, you know, me getting bullied because I'm the smelly, gross kid, but just people tend to feel more comfortable and positive around people who take care of themselves in that way. And maybe that's fair, maybe that's not fair, but we know that it's true. So good hygiene is connected to our psychological wellness in a significant way. Um, as we get up the more kind of sophisticated parts of self-care, self-regulation and self-management, having good self-care means you have ways to get yourself de-escalated when you find yourself emotionally activated. I know this is what therapy is for, but therapy comes around once a week and you're not always going to have access to a therapist. So having strategies to help yourself regulate and manage difficult emotions that you weren't prepared for is another important aspect of self-care. A lot of people use meditation, mindfulness, different kind of breaks, drawing, journaling. These are fantastic ways to regulate oneself and manage, dysregulation in a healthy way. This is kind of like the psychological first aid piece, when unexpected things happen that increase our anger, frustration, sadness, anxiety. Do we have a little psychological first aid kit so we don't let things build off of each other in a way that can escalate our dysregulation? This is an important part of self-care. And stress management is tied into that. Life is stressful. I don't care who you are. And having structured ways to manage stress in a healthy way that doesn't impact relationships in a negative way, doesn't impact your daily functionality, in a negative way. These are important parts of self-care too. And now we're getting up even to, I mentioned all the way to the existential end of, being the best version of yourself from a spiritual perspective. That's part of self-care. We're not all there, but like that's a huge part of this. But But on the way to that, we can talk about goal setting, goal setting and pursuing these goals, setting attainable, meaningful goals for yourself just to keep yourself moving on the path to be your best version of yourself, the healthiest version of yourself from a psychological and other perspectives. We can't really do that without meaningful goal setting and attainable goal setting. So that's another piece of the self-care component here that we can all do a better job with. So that's what I mean when I talk about the self-care component of preventive mental health care. So finally, we have the second E, and that is engagement. And this one's very easy to understand on paper. This is just doing purposeful activities that have meaning, hopefully are pleasurable. There are things that I do in my work life, activities that maybe I don't have a clear sense of purpose, or they're not pleasurable, but they're part of me being a good worker. They're part of me, being a well-rounded employee. Who wants to be respected by his peers and who wants to contribute, to a professional environment. So even if the activities that I do, I don't love and I don't understand the point of, and luckily in my job there aren't a lot of those, but I know a lot of people struggle with that, with their work life and other parts of their life. So the more that we can find clarity of purpose in the things that we do and find pleasure in the things we do, hobbies, activities I have as the last point. This is another thing that plays right in there. But when I talk about engagement, I'm talking about any kind of engagement. It's social engagement, it's work engagement, it's play engagement. You know, I have a mantra, work hard, play hard, rest hard. This is good, preventive mental health care and good self-care in general. I already talked about the sleep thing, but just finding meaningful things to be engaged in, staying connected socially, taking small risks and keep initiating interactions with people, being smiling, you know, when people pass by you in the hallway or walk into an elevator that you're in. And then work engagement I talked about, being present, being active, being engaged, in a meaningful way. Uh, you know, says a lot to your colleagues and will increase your work productivity and work satisfaction. I guarantee it. And then also making sure that we're engaged in things that we do for fun, not just hobbies and activities, but going out with your friends and doing things that you like and cutting loose a little bit, as long as we're, safe and responsible, but just being socially active and doing fun things, creating memories so you can tell stories, you can post them on social media and show everybody how fun your life is, things like that. So just staying engaged. And what I'll say in closing about engagement, and I've told literally every student and parent I've ever worked with this, that as a clinical psychologist, here's one thing that I know. And I beg them to trust me and take my word for this, even though I can't totally prove it. There's a lot of evidence to support it, but I can't prove it without beyond the shadow of a doubt. But the worst thing, like if I were to, I would never do this because it's extremely cruel. But if I wanted to make somebody depressed that wasn't depressed, or to make a depressed person more depressed, here's what I would prescribe: 2, 3 weeks, or several days in a row of isolation and inactivity. Don't do anything and don't talk to anyone. Don't interact with anyone. And do that for a good 2 to 3 weeks. And you should be good and depressed by then. And I'd be right. And with regard to anxiety, same thing with avoidance. Avoidance and anxiety have an unbelievably codependent, gross, almost incestuous relationship. So if I wanted to make a non-anxious person anxious, or an anxious person a lot more anxious, I would tell them for the next several days, couple weeks, don't do anything that you're not 100% comfortable doing. If there's anything that's in front of you that even makes you the tiny bit anxious, don't do it. And if they followed that advice for, like I said, 2 or 3 weeks, I promise you there would be clinical levels of anxiety. I'm glad that I'm not a cruel person that would do that to anyone, especially my clients, but I'm just making a point that I hope that you got. Isolation, inactivity, avoidance, these are things that invite and exacerbate depression and anxiety symptoms. Just to name a two, there could probably go down a bunch of other negative emotions that it invites. So this last component of the sense model, engagement, is the antithesis of that. It's the opposite action of that. So please avoid isolation, inactivity, and avoidance. And then you got one of the main things about preventive mental health down pat. So speaking of which, I hope you found this at least a little bit useful, this sense model. Again, my name is John Dominguez. I am a clinical psychologist for Meridian Psychiatric Partners. And if you're interested in looking at the next video, the next one in the series, I'll be presenting a model for personal growth. So I do hope you tune into that. And thanks for joining me today. And I hope you guys all be well. Thanks again.